Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the first in a series of videos called Linux Bash Shell Script Basics. This is part 1. By the time you are done with this video, you should be able to write your own scripts and start doing amazing things in the terminal on your Linux machine. Before we jump into things, couple of things I got to talk about this series. First of all, I am assuming that you are at a certain skill level, that you are familiar with running commands in the terminal, that you maybe have edited a few text files, and that you are somewhat acquainted with navigating the file system and manipulating the files with commands. If you are not quite there yet, in the description of this video, look for a link to another video I have posted called Beginner's Guide to the Bash Terminal, and that should give you the very basics you need to get started here. Second of all, I want to say that this is going to be a sort of non-linear way of learning how to do this. This video is going to be very straightforward, but future videos in the series are going to become more haphazard as I just show you different tools and different concepts that you can use to write Bash scripts. It's kind of the way I learned this, and it's kind of the way I'm going to teach it. There are many different books on the subject. Nobody approaches it exactly the same way. Bash is actually very flexible. This video series, no matter how many videos I do, is not going to be a comprehensive guide in any way, shape, or form. It's going to be an introductory series that's hitting the very highlights, and I encourage you to go off and do your own research and learn how to do your own thing. Anybody can learn how to do this. Don't let all those people out there who are telling you that you need to have a computer science degree in order to learn how to do things in a terminal sway you from sitting down in front of your own Linux machine and doing your own thing. And if you are watching this video and you are not yet part of the Linux world, you have not learned how to do it, do keep in mind that this is not a necessity to using Linux. There are many Linux distributions where you can point and click and do everything, but this is a very powerful part of the Linux system. Bash is an extremely awesome tool that you can do all kinds of things with, and running Linux without at least having a nodding acquaintance with how to do these things is sort of like buying a very expensive sports car and never going beyond third gear. It's just kind of silly. Linux and Bash go together, but Bash is available everywhere, as we will soon see. So do keep that in mind as we roll along. This video is going to teach you what Bash is, what a shell script is, how to write a shell script, how to make that script executable, how to test that script, and it will also tell you where to put the script once you have it completed to make it act just like any other command that you would type in a terminal, and you can run it like any other program on the system. So let's get started on that. Bash is a shell. A shell is a program that runs on top of the kernel, and it takes humanly readable information that you type at a keyboard and sends it as commands to the kernel, and then the kernel sends commands to the hardware to make the computer do things that you want it to do. So in that sense, a shell is a command line interpreter. Bash is not the only shell available for Linux. There are tons of shells. There's ZSH, there is C shell, Corn, Fish, many others. But Bash is the one that is usually shipped by default with most Linux distributions. It is a universal computer language. It's available on Mac OS. It's available on Windows. If you know how to do this, then you can talk to pretty much any computer out there, even embedded devices. It doesn't make any difference. Bash is also a computer programming language. It's built right in. So it's not just executing commands, and you can access that language to make your system do some very powerful things. And as this series progresses, you're going to see that. So what is a script? A script is simply a list of commands in a file, a plain text file, and the shell reads those commands and executes them like you type them in. The shell doesn't care where it gets its information from. It can come from you typing, it can come from another program running on the system, or it can come from a script. And that's what we're concentrating on in this video series. Scripts make really complex tasks possible with just a couple of clicks or typing in a command. Because yes, you can make a script work from a menu to do all kinds of things. You can set the script to run at startup so that it will put settings in your video card, connect Samba network shares, open up a bunch of programs, do anything on your system that you want done every time it starts up. That's one of the big uses for writing a script, is to do something like that. And a script can range from just a line or two all the way up to a full-fledged program. There are lots of programs that are written in Bash that are out there for you to use, and actually on your system right now there's a bunch of programs that when you type a command, that's what's happening. And you can learn how to do this. There are people out there who are very intimidated by the terminal. They want to tell you that it's very hard and they're afraid of it. Don't be that way at all. It's just a few very simple rules that you have to learn, and then after that you discover that Bash is very flexible. There's usually several ways of doing things, and whatever works for you is fine. Now, once you start sharing your scripts, you may find that you get some negative feedback from some not so pleasant people in the community who want to say that you're doing something wrong because you didn't code the way they do, you didn't lay it out in a certain style, you haven't indented it this way or that way, and that you should just give up and walk away because you don't know what you're doing. That is absolutely wrong, because there's no wrong way to do this. If you write code that accomplishes what you need to get done and it runs, fine. Now, that is not to say that there might be an easier way to do it. And kind people in the community that see what you've done may come along and offer some constructive criticism and say you could do this way. And that's perfectly all right. Just kind of ignore the negative people, because they're really non-productive and they don't help anybody, and they're not going to help you either. And if you are moving along here and advancing, keep in mind that we all have to start somewhere. So once you learn more about this, remember that there's always somebody coming up behind you who's just starting out. And it's my little soapbox for the video here, so we can get into the basic stuff. So in order to write a basic script, you will need a text editor. All distributions of Linux ship with a text editor in the menu. If you're running Ubuntu with the GNOME desktop, it's gedit. If you're running Linux Mint, then you get xed. If you're running other distributions, you may get something called Kate, or you might get something called Mousepad. Whatever it is, it's a plain text editor, and they all do kind of the same thing. They allow you to type plain text in and save them. There's also a bunch that run in the terminal. There's Vi or VI, depending on how you want to say that, which is the most basic editor of all. It's very hard to use for people just starting out. It tends to be a little bit cryptic. My favorite to use in the terminal is Nano, and we're going to be using Nano today. So, yeah, I'm not a Vi fan out there, guys. Sorry about that. So, let's talk about writing a very basic script. And all you really need to know is just these three things. First of all, it has to start out with a shebang or a hash bang. And what that does, it tells the system that this is going to be a script, and it tells it where to get its command line interpreter to run the script. And in most cases, that's going to be Bash. You may see some scripts out there that point to SH. And that is the original shell. That these days is like a compatibility layer. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. SH is the original Unix shell, and Linux being a Unix-like system will run SH. SH is for portability. It will run on any Unix Linux system out there. But you don't need to write in SH if you're doing it for Linux. Pretty much every system has Bash on it. And we'll talk in later videos about writing portable scripts that run on all kinds of systems. We're concentrating on running writing scripts that are going to run on your own system for the video today. So let us jump into a terminal, and I will actually show you this stuff instead of just looking at text, and we'll get right in. So with Nano, you can just type in Nano and then hit enter and then choose a file name to save your file as later, or you can give it a file name right up front. We're going to give it the file name first, and I'm going to use the .sh extension. You don't have to do that. The main thing about naming your script is that your script will have a unique name. You don't want to name your script after something that is already a command on your computer. So you can use the which command to see if something is like what you want to name it. You want to keep it simple, of course, because you're probably going to have to type it again and again. And I put the sh extension on scripts that aren't going to be permanently installed in a place on the computer where they become like commands. Maybe it's a script I want to keep over here that I'm going to run occasionally. That way, if that script ever gets separated from its friends in its little directory that it's living in, I know that, oh, this is a script. And a lot of times the desktop will identify anything with an sh as a script as well, or at least it should. But you don't have to use that extension. So now let's open this up, and the first thing that we need to put in our script, as we discussed, is the shebang, which is basically a hash mark, pound sign, whatever you crosshatch, whatever you want to call that thing. And then we put an exclamation point, and then we put the path to where our interpreter is. In this case, it is bash. So it's bin bash. You're going to see scripts out there that point to other things like sh. We talked about that. We can also have, this is the same format that scripts that run in Python use. It just points at Python. So if you want to learn other languages, there you go. They kind of work the same way. So once you have that in there, you can now put a comment in your script, and I highly recommend that you use lots of comments in your scripts. We are going to write a script today and yes, I am going to commit horrible typos, all kinds of typing sin as we do this, because that's just the nature of how my brain works. I can't type and talk at the same time, so there will be plenty of opportunities for you to point at the screen and laugh. But you get the gist. So you want to put up front a comment that basically kind of tells you what your script is. Anything that starts out with that little pound sign there, other than your shebang, will be regarded as a comment, and the system will not try and execute anything you put in there. So now you can start putting in commands. Of course, you could just put commands in. You don't have to put comments in if you don't want to, but it's a really good idea to do that and make them detailed so you understand what they're doing. And the reason why is because if you write your script today and go back and edit it tomorrow, you probably are going to be able to figure out what you did. But if you write a script and come back 6 months, a year, or a couple of years down the road, you may not know what you were thinking at the time and why you put what you put in there. So you really need to notate that well. That happened to me just the other day. I was looking at a script that I wrote a long time ago, and there was this one command in there, and I was thinking, I don't need that. And I hadn't put the note in the script, this needs to be there. I took it out, then my script stopped working, and I went, oh, I guess I need that. And I went back and did it, and that was my fault because I didn't document it. So let's go ahead and write our command. We're just going to put a simple echo command. All the echo command does is it prints on the screen whatever you put in here. It has to be in quotations. And you notice that as we go along here, this is changing colors. That is something that a lot of good text editors do to make it easier for you to interpret what you're looking at. That's it. We've written a script. One thing I would like to point out is that as far as comments are concerned, you can also put them after a command. And sometimes this is really useful when you have a bunch of little short commands and it's very dense. If they're clustered and they're indented in certain ways, so you can see exactly what that command is doing. Stuff that's really kind of intense and not very obvious looking, you can do this and it makes it a whole lot easier down the road. So we can put a command, we can put a comment after this that says what this does. Prints stuff on the screen. You know, that's all you got to do is put that in there like that. It's optional, but it's nice to have. So, that is our basic script, and all we have to do now is save it. So in Nano, it's Control-O to save. We already have our file name there, and we have saved our script. We get out of Nano, and let's make sure that it's there. It should be. So go in, we'll list the storage, and we'll do it the long way so we can see it. What? See, I told you, man. Lots of opportunities for laughter here. So there's our script in here. You see the one thing. Now, this isn't executable yet. It's not going to run. We have to make it executable so it will run. And we can do that one of two ways. We use the change mode command, chmod. Just don't put the E on the end. Now we can make it executable by adding +X to it and then give it the file name, which is called first. And this should make it executable. Now how are we going to know that? I'm going to list it again. And look, it has changed color now. The shell that we're working in, bash, uses color codes on the screen as well, if your system is set up to do that. And if it's an executable file, it shows it in a different color there. So we know that that works. There's another way to do that, and it's actually my preferred method for making things executable because I have more control over it, and that is to use octal, where you give the permissions directly. So with octal, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but octal is it's just numbers. So the first set of permissions here is for you. The next set of permissions is for people in your group, and the last set is for people in the world, anybody that can see the script. So you can make it executable or not executable by adding the right numbers, and it's really quite simple. If you have a 4, that means it's a readable file. And then if you add 2 to that, so number 2, that stands for a writable file. So if you want something to be readable and writable, then you put 6. If you want it to be executable, then you just add a 1 to that. So execution is a 1. So I can make this so that, for instance, right now it is, I can read, write, and execute it. People in my group can read it and they can execute it, and people who come across the script from somewhere else, they can execute it and they can read it as well. But I can change that. I can put like this and say, okay, so now I'm making it so you can read it, but you can't execute it. I'm the only person that can execute that script. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And then if we list it again, now you will see that the only thing that you can do over here in these permissions that are listed at the first part there is read if you are not somebody. Anyway, so you get the main idea. If that was confusing to you, then just remember the first command, which is just add executable. And if we do that and we list the storage again, look, that's what we get. So everybody can execute it. Okay, so now that it's an executable script, we need to test our script, and the best way to do that is just run it. The script is not yet in a place where the system will automatically find it. Let me clear this and do that this way so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So what you're going to have to do is tell the system where it is. There's 2 ways to do that. You can do an absolute path to the script, which means that you tell it how to get there. So in this case, it would be home, and then it would be my name, Joe, and then it would be junk, and then it would be the script first, and it'll run. Let's see if it runs. Well, it ran. It printed hello world. We know that works. But that can be a bit cumbersome. So there's another way to do that, and that is just simply to start out with, and what that tells the shell is, okay, it's right here. You don't have to go looking for it. Don't look in the path. Don't look in the any of that garbage. Don't do it. It's not there yet. We haven't stuck it there, so just run it from here. So we know our script works. So if you've written that script with me and you're running it, congratulations. You have run your very first script. So what we want to do now is we want to talk a little bit about how to test the script. And I have here all that stuff. And basically you just run it. And if you run into errors, then what's going to happen is that it's going to tell you what they are. But sometimes it gets a little bit confusing, and you'd like to see what the script is actually doing, because most commands don't automatically just print what they're doing out to the screen unless there's some sort of output coming out of them. And sometimes you just don't know what's going on. So to fix that, what you can do is you can run, I don't know if this is going to do much for us. Let me get back over here to nano first sh, right? So all you do is you want to put tracing on your script. You put this option on bash there. And then go ahead and save your script. I don't know how much we're going to see because this is such a simple script, but we'll give it a try. We'll give it a try. We'll see what it does. Okay, yes. See how it is actually showing us? It says plus and then echo world. It's telling us what command is running, and then it shows us the output. This can be very, very useful. Now, once you've figured out what's wrong and you have fixed your script and it's running the way it should, then go back into your script and then remove that right there and save it. And now when it runs, you're not going to see that. You don't want to leave that in there for, your script to run all the time. You really want that to be right there. So that's it. You have written a script. So now the next thing is where to put it on your system to make it useful. So let's go look up here at our documentation about this, and we'll talk about this, because there's a couple of places that you can put it. Okay. The first place that you might want to put it is your own bin directory. If you're going to be creating scripts, compiling programs, whatever, you might want to have your own private bin, and you would do that simply by creating a directory called bin in your home directory. So let's go to my home directory and let's list it, and you see that I have created a directory in there, lowercase bin. Now what happens is the configuration files for bash, when you load up your system, they are looking for that particular little directory, and if it finds it, it will add it to your path statement. So let's take a minute here and talk about your path and what that is. And we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves because we're talking about variables, which we're going to get into more in a future video. But a variable is simply some bit of information that is stored in memory for the shell to use. And you can create your own variables. We'll talk about that later, but now we're going to talk about a shell variable called path. To see what that looks like, we just execute this command, path in uppercase. And you see we've got this long thing here. Well, what this is where your programs live on your system. And you notice that the very first thing in my path is /home/joe/bin. That is because I created that little directory called bin, and the system looks for that. And actually, I will show you where it looks for that. So if we are going to, I just want to cat.bashrc, and the cat command just types it on the screen. This is the one of the configuration files for when you boot into your system and the bash shell loads. It looks at this to look for certain parameters. Most distributions have one, and you have all kinds of different things in here. So let's see if it's in here, or it might be in profile. Actually, I do think it's in profile, so let me go down here. We'll do that to profile instead. We're going to get back to bashrc in a minute. Profile is another one. So the profile one is actually really short. This is a configuration file that when the shell loads, it grabs a bunch of stuff and it puts it in here. And let's see. It's a lot of the stuff that you see in your bash RC file might be in here as well. It's okay if it's duplicated. And so anyway, in the profile, you'll see this bit of text right here, this command. What this does is it searches for your bin directory that you've created, and if it's there, it adds it to the path. That's how it works. So I went through all of that to show you that, and this is where it is. Now, I have noticed in some distributions that for some reason or the other, they have done something. Usually what this does, the profile, is it grabs your bash RC if it exists, and then it runs it. And then your bash RC runs, and it dumps back out of that, and then it's supposed to run this. Couple of distributions like MX Linux, for instance, for some reason or other, when it runs the bash RC, it doesn't catch this. So what you have to do is grab this little bit of code here and stick it at the end of your bash RC so that it will automatically find the bin. But in Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and many others, it just finds it, and there's no problem at all. Now, what I have done here is I have made it so that if you do need to add that to your bash RC, I've made it a little bit easier, because what I have done is I have come up with the same kind of code in a little bit simpler way. So if your system isn't finding it for some reason, stick this at the end of your bash RC or create a .bashrc file in your text editor and just throw this bit of code in there. And what that will do is it will cause that to do exactly the same thing, and it's just written in a slightly different syntax. So yes, that kind of puts us ahead of where we are in this, but there you go. So that's the first place that you can put stuff, and I highly recommend having a bin of your own to put your own programs in. The other place to put stuff like this is user local bin. This will make your script available to not only you, but everybody else on the system. And if your script at some place requires elevated privileges, then you want to maybe put it there, because then you can run it with sudo in front of it, depending on how the script is written. Anything that runs in your own local bin directory is not going to be able to be executed with elevated privileges. It's just because when you type sudo, basically you're trying to run a program as the root user, and the root user is not going to be looking in your personal home directory to find the information, where it doesn't have the same path. It doesn't have the same information in the path as far as where it looks for its programs. So now that we got through that, and I certainly hope that I didn't confuse you, let's talk about a few things before we wrap this up. Bash is very well documented. Don't hesitate to search the web for help. When you're trying to do something, if you say, how to blank in a bash script, you would be amazed at what comes up. I've written entire programs that way. I mean, I had no clue what I was doing, but I knew what I wanted to accomplish. So I phrased that in such a way, and I put it in Google, and I typed it, and boom, I got 14 different explanations of how to do it, and I just picked the one that looked the simplest and easiest for me, and sometimes it's just a matter of copying, pasting code in your script and making it run. That's it. It's pretty awesome. Very important that you always use an absolute path when calling on a file in a script. That is a big deal. So in other words, if you're going to be writing to or grabbing a file, then you'll want to use an absolute path, unless you have, for some reason, maybe you know what directory you're going to be in, because you never know where the script is going to be launched from. You may be in another working directory, and then it can't find it. So you can't just say, grab the file, stuff.txt that's in the directory that you're working in. It doesn't work that way. You have to tell it exactly where that is. That's a common stumbling block that people have, as they sit there and they don't know why their script is working. Well, you didn't tell it where to get the file. Write detailed comments so you'll know what you did later on. We talked about that. and save a copy of everything that you write, even the simplest stuff. Even if you're only going to use it once or twice, stick it away somewhere. Have a little directory in your system. I've got one in Documents called Scripts, and pretty much everything that I've written and everything that I use, I have a copy of it in there. Because once you do that, when you're writing a new script, you may say to yourself, oh, well, I did that in this other. How did I do that? You can go look at it. Sometimes you can just copy and paste, and you can just pull things from one to the next, and that's it. And I'm going to show you one more bonus thing before I wrap the video up, because I didn't put it on the list here, but I thought about it afterwards, and I thought I may or may not show this, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do that because it's something that's really important to know when you're dealing with scripts and when you're reading scripts as well. So let's go ahead and reload our script. And what is that? Nano. Oh, we're not in that directory. Let me show you an absolute path. This is what an absolute path does. Nano. We use that for a shortcut for our home directory. And we want junk. And we know that our script is called first. This is why you need to use an absolute path. I was assuming that all I had to do was type in nano and give it the file name. I'm not in that directory. I have to tell it where it is. Now that I tell it where it is, everything's cool and it does what I need it to do. Okay, so this is your bonus for this video before I wrap it up. And that is that sometimes you will have a command that has a lot of information in it. In fact, one of the reasons for writing scripts to begin with is to take ponderously long commands and make them easier to execute by, you could have a script that says, you could have a big long command that does something, and you could just have the script name be doit, D-O-I-T, and it'll do it, and it'll run all this stuff. So one of the tricks that you can do is to take a very long command and stretch it out over, or a list of commands. So let's say that I am doing this command, sudo apt install. We're installing a bunch of packages, okay? And I have my big long list of packages. So let me just come up. I want to install the lame package, which is really a package. A bunch of audio stuff here. You know, I want to type Asunder. I want to install that, which is a CD ripper. I want to install Bracero, which is a CD writer. I don't know. This is where my mind's going for some reason. So it's all of this stuff. I need a program called Sound Converter. Well, you notice now it's starting to get long, right? Well, there's more stuff I want to add to this. So what I do is I use a backslash. Type it correctly, please. Don't capitalize that. There you go. You use the backslash, which is under the pipe, which is under the backspace key on most keyboards. And then I hit return, but that return is not going to go into the script. It's not like it's going to another line. That backslash does something called accept a character. It's the same thing if you're naming a file and it has spaces. You have to accept that space. So I can just keep typing stuff and put in other programs that I want to install. Let's say I want to put in MC, which is that's a command line file manager. Just anything I can think of here, and I can keep typing and go on and on. You get the idea. And what happens is that becomes one long command, but it becomes readable. It doesn't keep moving off to the right of the screen. In my scripts, I try and keep everything under 80 characters because when a regular terminal pops up, it's usually 80 characters wide. That's the normal size for it. So that way you don't have things running off the edge of the screen, or the text editor isn't trying to wrap them or something like that. Keeps things very readable. So that's your bonus for this video, how to do that. And no, I'm just going to get out of here. Just let me out. No, I don't want to save that. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So thank you for watching the video. I hope that this has been a good start for you. Can't wait to hear your feedback. And the next time we do one of these, we're going to start getting into more advanced concepts. We'll talk about variables. We're going to talk about functions. We'll talk about if statements, things like that. So check out Easy Linux on the web for more information about Linux, and also keep in mind that that is where the text that you saw in this video is going to be living. Please join the discussion at EzeeTalk. That is our own community forum, which we run ourselves on our own servers. So it is free, secure, and it's fun. We have a lot of moderators that keep nastiness out of there, and it's a fun place to be. You can get help with things, and it's a growing community for sure. Also, you can give us a like on Facebook. If you are a Facebook user, that community is growing as well. That's it for now. Thank you for watching.